Pastor Jackson was the senior pastor of Golden Crown Gospel Church, a very big church with over 10,000 members. He was married to his beautiful wife, Pastor Mrs. Angela Jackson, and they had 3 sons, Joseph, David, and Gideon. He had 3 other pastors who assisted him in running the affairs of the church. Most of the church members were very dedicated and loyal to the ministry, going out for outreaches and street evangelism. Out of these very dedicated members, there was a particular woman who was the most dedicated to the church's activities. She was simply known as Mama Ujunwa, and she was a widow. Mama Ujunwa was so committed that she didn't miss any of the services for any reason, no matter how busy she was. She was loved by the church members, popular for her gentle nature and kindness. She would move from street to street with her daughter every Wednesday, preaching the gospel and sharing the church's flyers. After this, she would return home and get her daughter ready for school, while she prepared to go to her stall at a nearby market where she sold foodstuff. She was always punctual to church programs and made herself available every Saturday to clean the church premises, even though the church had cleaners who kept the church clean. Pastor Jackson began to notice Mama Ujunwa's commitment and dedication, and he was really impressed. One Saturday morning, he stepped out of his office in the church compound and saw Mama Ujunwa cleaning the church as usual. He walked up to her. She quickly bowed her head in greeting when she saw him. "Good morning, God's servant," she greeted respectfully. "Good morning, madam. How are you doing today?" he asked calmly. "I am fine, Pastor, thank you, sir," she replied, face down. "I have been seeing you around, and I must say that you are very committed in the things of the kingdom. May God bless you abundantly." Pastor Jackson prayed as she said Amen repeatedly. "Can you tell me about yourself?" he asked her politely. Mama Ujunwa told the pastor that she was a widow whose husband had died 5 years earlier. She also explained how her in-laws had sent her and her only daughter and child, Ujunwa, out of their mansion after her husband's demise. "They accused me of promiscuity and having a hand in my husband's death because he died mysteriously in the middle of the night. He was in perfect health before we went to bed, only for him to scream from his sleep in the night," she went on. "I quickly drove him to the hospital that night, but he was pronounced dead on arrival. His family sent us packing after his burial, and I managed to rent a room apartment close to the church here, and I started a petty business at the nearby market with the little savings I had," she concluded. Pastor Jackson was moved by her story, and he decided to help her. "Thank God you didn't allow your challenges to affect your service to God," he said to her. He offered her a room and parlor self-contained in one of his houses, very close to the church. He also promised to give her some money to add to her business. Mama Ujunwa went on her knees and thanked the pastor. She couldn't believe her ears. She had always trusted that the church was the safest place for her daughter. It had been her source of strength through life's challenges, a place where she felt secure. She saw the pastor's offer as a reward for her years of stewardship. True to his words, about a week later, Mama Ujunwa was handed the keys to the apartment, and the pastor gave her 500,000 naira to add to her business. He also ordained her as a deaconess in the church. Every member of the church was happy for her, as they felt like she truly deserved it. The house was on the same street with the house where the pastor lived with his family. Mama Ujunwa and her daughter became very close to the pastor's family. They visited them often, and Mama Ujunwa sometimes compelled her 14-year-old daughter to go run some errands for the pastor's wife. The two families became so close that Mama Ujunwa would travel sometimes to buy foodstuff directly from the farmers in the villages for her business. She was beginning to buy in large quantities and made more profit because of the support from Pastor Jackson. During those periods, Ujunwa stayed in the pastor's house and went to school from there. Her mother was so certain that her daughter was in safe hands, being not just a Christian home, but one whose head was a pastor. If only she could see the end from the beginning, she never would have allowed her daughter to step her feet into the pastor's compound, talk more of living with them while she was away. She didn't know that she had pushed her only child into the worst nightmare and destruction that no one would wish for her own child. Ujunwa was Mama Ujunwa's only child. She had her after a painful fertility battle that lasted 7 years. Her late husband stood by her against all odds when his family tried to force him to marry another wife. He insisted that kids were gifts from God, and since both of them were certified okay medically, he was willing to wait till God decided to give them children. Their breakthrough came after 7 years when his wife began to feel nauseous. She was confirmed pregnant, and their joy knew no bounds. She had a smooth pregnancy journey and gave birth to beautiful Ujunwa, who became the apple of her father's eyes. He loved her dearly and did everything possible to make life comfortable for both his wife and daughter. After the birth of Ujunwa, they tried to have more kids, but they were not forthcoming. Papa Ujunwa had resigned to fate and focused on giving his daughter a good life, as he was very wealthy. He was doing just that before his unfortunate demise, which happened when Ujunwa was 10 years. Mama Ujunwa was then thrown out by her husband's family, and she ended up in a one-room apartment close to the Golden Crown Gospel Church, where she became a dedicated member. She made sure she instilled morals in her daughter, teaching her to be respectful and talk to people with courtesy. But there was one very important thing she failed to teach her. She thought Ujunwa was still too young to be taught. Mama Ujunwa didn't teach Ujunwa sex education and how she could stand up for herself if sexually harassed by anyone. The only thing she said to her was that she shouldn't allow any man to touch her. This was unfortunately too ambiguous for her to understand. She saw her male classmates touch the females and no one was hurt, so she shrugged off her mother's warning. Ujunwa was already 14 years by the time Pastor Jackson decided to help her mother after he saw her dedication and commitment in the church. Ujunwa, who was a church girl like her mother, was full of youthful energy and was used to the rhythms of church life. Her mother continued to send her to the pastor's house to run errands for Pastor Angela. Although the pastor's wife didn't think it was necessary sending Ujunwa to run errands for her, she didn't tell her to stop, as she didn't want to hurt her or make her feel like her daughter was not welcomed in her home. On one of such occasions, when Mama Ujunwa traveled to buy farm produce directly from farmers in the village, she took longer than expected. It was holiday period and the children were all at home. In the morning, Pastor Jackson would leave home to his office at the church premises, while his wife left for her supermarket, which was located in the heart of the town. Ujunwa was usually left alone with the pastor's 3 sons, Joseph, David, and Gideon. The pastor and his wife didn't think anything could go wrong, as they felt they had taught the children enough to keep them in check. The 3 sons were all older than Ujunwa, with David being the eldest of the 3, and he was 21 years. David gained admission into the university and had spent just 1 year. Before he gained admission, Pastor Jackson and his wife were very strict with them and hardly allowed them go out at will. Their movement was triangular, home to church to school and back home. As soon as he got to school, he felt like he had gotten all the freedom he needed. He began to make friends with some terrible boys who had introduced him into several bad habits. They told him to go ahead and have a girlfriend and have sex as much as he wanted, which he had already begun back in school. He had a girlfriend with whom he slept whenever he wanted. Although he was still having doubts about the new way of life which he had just been introduced to, which was the direct opposite of his parents' teachings, when he saw Ujunwa, he decided to try things out with her. David was naturally a funny guy who had a way of making friends easily because of his friendly nature. One hot afternoon, Ujunwa was in the visitor's room, which was where she always spent the night whenever her mother was away. She was reading a short story when David knocked the door, went inside and bolted the door. Joseph and Gideon were taking a nap. He began to tell her stories about school life and how much fun there was at the university. He also told her some jokes which made her laugh so hard. Then he moved closer to her and began to touch her. Ujunwa resisted, but he calmed her down, saying he was only playing with her. After a while, he slipped his hands into her private parts. Ujunwa wanted to scream, but he covered her mouth with his other hand. He eventually had his way with her, and she began to bleed. She cried so hard and threatened to report him, but he warned her. "If you try it, I will kill you, I promise." He opened his pocket and showed her a small knife to back up his threat. Ujunwa became afraid and promised not to tell anyone. He went out and returned with a roll of tissue paper with which he asked her to clean up. Then he walked back to his room, feeling satisfied. Ujunwa was so scared that she locked herself up in her room till the pastor's wife returned in the evening. Pastor Angela noticed her change in mood and asked her what was wrong with her. "I am fine, Ma. I have been sleeping all day," she lied. "Fine then, come and join me here and let's prepare dinner," she said to Ujunwa calmly. Ujunwa joined her in the kitchen and they began to cook. While they were at it, Pastor Angela asked her again if she was sure she was okay. Ujunwa wanted to tell her exactly what happened at this point, when David walked into the kitchen and shot her a dangerous glance. "I am fine, Mummy," she replied and quickly looked away. They all had dinner later, after which they retired to bed. Ujunwa couldn't sleep that night. The event of the day kept flashing through her mind. When she closed her eyes and tried to sleep, she sat up and cried bitterly. The next day, however, she gradually began to get over the event of the previous day. David walked up to her after their parents had left. He begged her to forgive him for what he did, saying he did it because she was beautiful and that he loved her. "I forgive you, David," Ujunwa said shyly. David invited her out to the compound and they played some games with Joseph and Gideon. This further helped Ujunwa to loosen up. 3 days after David had his way with Ujunwa, he sneaked into her room again. This time, he spoke to her calmly, telling her that he wanted her to be his girlfriend. He was gentle and easy with her, and he slept with her again. This time around, Ujunwa enjoyed every bit of it. After they were done, David asked her if she enjoyed it, and she agreed. "I enjoyed it, David, and I think I would like to try it again someday," she said, smiling. David was impressed. He promised to teach her different styles that would make her enjoy it even more. Ujunwa's mother spent over a week before she returned from her trip. She returned with some very rich farm produce as gift for the pastor's family, and she thanked them for taking good care of her daughter while she was away. Looking at Ujunwa, when she returned, Mama Ujunwa's motherly instinct told her something was not right about her daughter. Ujunwa was easily carried away. She caught her daughter smiling to herself on several occasions. She asked her what was wrong. "Nothing is wrong, Mama. I am just happy to be called your daughter. I love you," Ujunwa told her mum. Days passed and everything was good. Mama Ujunwa continued with her business and Ujunwa was always there to help out. David returned to school and bragged about his new catch to his bad friends in school, and they all praised him, also encouraging him to have more fun with his catch. Ujunwa, who was in JS2, also went back to school after the holiday. That term in school, they were taught about the reproductive system. This was how Ujunwa got to understand that what she was doing with David could result in pregnancy. She had begun her period about 3 months earlier, and she remembered her mother warning her again not to let any man touch her, as she could become pregnant. Mama Ujunwa also noticed that Ujunwa, who used to feel reluctant whenever she asked her to go to the pastor's house and help out, suddenly began to ask her to allow her to visit them, even when she didn't ask her to. Mama Ujunwa still didn't see anything off about her new behavior. She was even happy. Ujunwa and David continued to have sex whenever David was around. She had gone so deep in the act that she didn't wish to stop. David made her do so many things with him, and Ujunwa obeyed all. She was really enjoying it. When she returned home to her mother, she would act like the innocent church girl that her mother was used to. David also pretended to be the calm pastor's son whenever he was in the house, but immediately he got to school, he changed completely. This act by David and Uduwa continued for months, till Uduwa turned 16. By this time, she had become addicted to it and was very much aware of the dangers involved in it. Ujunwa suddenly missed her period one particular month, and she was really scared. She confided in one of her very close friends in school, who suggested that she did a urine pregnancy test. The girl went with her to the pharmacy and got a PT strip. She conducted the test, and it came out positive. Unsure of how to handle the situation, Ujunwa waited for David to return home after about 2 weeks. She went to their house, called him out to a secluded area in the compound, and broke the news to him. David was thrown off balance. "What do we do now? I am too young to be a father, and you are not ready yet, I am sure," David said. He was visibly shaking. "I will come up with something. In the meantime, please don't tell anyone about this. Do you understand?" he asked her. "Yes, I understand," Ujunwa responded. They both turned to leave and got the greatest shock of their life. Pastor Jackson was standing right behind them, and he heard everything. David and Ujunwa were shocked to their bones. They didn't hear any footsteps behind them, so they wondered how Pastor Jackson got to them without notice. The pastor had left some files at home when he was leaving home that morning. He came back home for the files, but parked his car outside and walked into the compound. He heard whispers from the backyard and decided to see who was there. Pastor Jackson stared at them for a while without saying a word. They both began to shiver. After the woe, the pastor turned and began to walk away. "Follow me now," he thundered. They both ran after him immediately. He led them into the living room and sat down on the sofa while both of them stood in front of him. "David and Eugene," the pastor began slowly. How long has this been going on?" he managed to ask. He was still too shocked. "For about 2 years, sir," David answered with his head bowed down. "David, where did I go wrong? I brought you up in the way of the Lord, fed you daily with the word of God. What did I not do for you? Why choose to repay me like this?" the pastor asked. "I am sorry, Daddy," David said, as he began to sob gently. Turning to Ujunwa, the pastor said, "And you, why didn't you reject him when he came to you? Some of you girls will be acting like saints, but you are worse than the prostitutes out on the street." "Have you told anyone about this?" he asked her. "No, sir, I haven't told anyone," Ujunwa quickly replied the maid. "Go home to your mother and do not say a word to her about it. I will handle it," Pastor Jackson said as he dismissed Ujunwa. Still shivering, she ran out of the house and went home. That night, immediately after dinner, Pastor Jackson told his wife about Ujunwa's pregnancy. She sat down on the floor and began to scream as tears ran down her cheeks. "David has killed me," she said as she continued to wail. "Put yourself together, woman. This is not the time to shout, but to act." He snapped at her, and she quickly composed herself. "I don't know what you mean by act. David is 23 and Ujunwa is 16. If he was bold enough to sleep with her for over 2 years until she got pregnant, then he should be ready to take responsibility," she said to her husband. "Hey, we'll be done with school next year. Then he should get a job and take care of her and the baby." Mrs. Angela drew her conclusion. "You have spoken like a woman speaks. Have you paused to consider how it will affect my personality?" Pastor asked her when she stopped talking. "I am a pastor and a mentor to many people. Married, singles, and young parents. They all see me as a role model. How do you expect them to see me if this news gets out there?" he asked her. "It will tarnish the reputation I spent so many years building, and I can't afford that," he concluded. "Honey, I don't understand what you are driving at. Keeping the baby and letting David take responsibility is the right thing to do. Allow people to say whatever they want to say," his wife insisted. All the while, His parents were having this discussion. David was at the door eavesdropping. God forbid that I become a father at this tender age, he muttered as he left the door and returned to his room. He decided to handle the matter his own way, without letting his parents know about it. He called one of his bad friends and told him what was going on and how his mother was insisting he took responsibility. The one is a small thing now, my guy. We have flushed plenty of pregnancies for girls, his friend told him on phone. He called out some ingredients for David and asked him to mix the substance together and give ujumwa to drink, and she would pass out the baby like a normal menstruation. David thanked him. In church on Sunday, during sermon, Pastor Jackson began to talk about parents who were very careless with the upbringing of their children. He said that some were busy trying to make money and ignored their primary responsibility as parents, which is raising godly children. He said a lot of things indirectly to Mama Ujumwa, but she didn't understand that he was talking to her, although she was touched by the sermon, and made up her mind to make amends. She didn't know that things had gone so bad. During service, David passed a note to Ujumwa, asking her to meet him at a certain location after service. At home that day, Pastor Jackson told his wife that he would invite Mama Ujumwa and reach an agreement with her to abort the baby while he paid them some money as compensation. His wife didn't like the idea and she kicked against it. They were unable to reach an agreement on that day. Ujumwa met David at the agreed location and he gave her the substance which he had already mixed together like his friend had explained. Ujumwa innocently took the substance after he told her that she would pass the baby out as normal period. Little did she know what she had done to herself. After she finished taking the substance, David asked her not to tell her mother anything about it, that she would be fine. Ujumwa was just a naive girl, and David knew this and was taking advantage of it. He made her promise not to tell her mother, after which she went back home. When she got home, her mother called her and sat her down. She had been sober since she left the service that morning. She felt like the preaching was really for her. She had gotten so busy trying to make money to cater for herself and her daughter that she completely forgot to pay close attention to her daughter. Ujumwa, my daughter, first of all, I want to thank you for being a good girl and for not putting me to shame and making my enemies laugh at me, she began. I know your father's family do not want anything good to come out of us, but God will put them to shame. I also want to beg you to forgive me for not being available and in your life like I should. I was only trying to make ends meet and give us a better life. Please forgive me, my daughter. And I promise that from now on, I will create more time for a mother-daughter bond. I won't be traveling to buy goods anymore. I have made arrangements on how the goods will be sent to me, while I simply just transfer money to them, she concluded, while giving Ujumwa a gentle pat on her back. Then she asked Ujumwa if there was anything she wanted to talk to her about. Ujumwa thought for a while and said she had nothing to tell her mother. Feel free to talk to me, my baby. Ideally, I should be your best friend. Don't hide anything from Mummy, okay? She told her. Okay, Mummy, Ujumwa responded. Then, her mother asked her to go into the kitchen and make some food for them, which she did. They had lunch that afternoon and also dinner later that night. After dinner, she told Ujumwa some nice African folk tales. It was a happy moment for Ujumwa. The last time her mother told her stories was just before her father's demise. She didn't realize how much she had missed it until that night. She begged her mother to always tell her such lovely stories, and her mother promised to do so. Then they went to bed. Ujumwa suddenly screamed from her sleep in the middle of the night, squeezing her stomach and rolling on the floor in pain. Her mother jumped up and asked her what was wrong with her. I feel very severe pain in my tummy, Mummy. Yeah, she screamed even louder. Mama Ujumwa became confused. Could it be the food they ate, she wondered? But they both ate the food and she was doing fine. Did you eat anything outside the food we both ate in this house? She asked her daughter, looking confused. No, Mummy, Ujumwa managed to respond as she continued to roll on the ground in pain. Suddenly, she began to bleed. In a matter of minutes, the whole floor was filled with blood. At this point, the pain had become unbearable. Ujunwa began to spill the beans. She told her mother how David, the pastor's son, had his way with her and how they kept having sex until she became pregnant. He gave me a substance to drink this afternoon, saying it will flush out the baby, she added. Jesus, Ujunwa finished me. Mama Ujunwa screamed as she began to wail. She ran out of a house and alerted her neighbor who had a car. The man was kind enough to take them to the hospital that night. The doctor on duty demanded a deposit before they could commence treatment, after they ran a scan on her. He said that Ujunwa's womb was ruptured and that urgent surgery was needed to save her life. Thankfully, Mama Ujunwa had some money with which she was planning to restock. She quickly made the transfer and Ujunwa was rolled into the theatre. The surgery lasted for over an hour. That was the longest 1 hour Mama Ujunwa ever had in her entire life. She continued to cry uncontrollably, begging God to have mercy on her and not render her childless in her old age. Dear God, I know I have been very careless with my parental duties. Please, I beg you to have mercy on my poor child. I take all the blame. I failed as a parent. Please give me one more chance to make things right, she prayed, as she continued to pace up and down the corridor of the hospital. Then the doctor finally came out. The look on his face nearly made Mama Ujunwa collapse. Doctor, how is my daughter? Mama Ujunwa asked, looking anxious. The doctor stared at her for a while, then he turned, facing his office. Come with me to my office, Ma, he told her without looking back. Doctor, whatever it is, please tell me here and now. I will take it in good faith, Mama Ujunwa blurted out, stopping the doctor. He turned to face her and wanted to say something, but Mama Ujunwa interrupted him. Was the surgery successful? Were there complications? Please tell me, doctor. Tell me everything went fine, Mama Ujunwa said, looking so restless. I am a widow, and that girl is my life. She is my only child. She is the one I am living for. If anything happens to her, I will die, Mama Ujunwa added as she broke down in tears, thinking that the worst had happened. The surgery was successful, the doctor said, jolting her to her feet. She began to dance and sing praises to God, while the doctor watched her in amusement. God of the widow and God of the fatherless, thank you for coming through for me. I will serve you forever, she sang. She was about moving her dancing steps to another gear when the doctor gave her a gentle tap. Madam, I asked you to come with me to the office because there is more, he said to her. She lost a lot of blood already, and she would need to be transfused as soon as possible. Her PCV is very low, he added. He called a nurse and asked her to go with Mama Ujunwa to the lab to get the result for Ujunwa's blood test so she could get blood. Go to the blood bank after getting the test result and get 2 pints of blood for a start. After the transfusion, I will tell you other things you need to know, he added. Mama Ujunwa thanked him and hurriedly left for the lab. She did exactly as she was told, and soon Ujunwa was moved to a private ward and they began to transfuse Ujunwa. Mama Ujunwa was allowed to go in and see her daughter, but was warned strictly not to make noise. She sat by Ujunwa's bed and began to sob softly when she saw how helpless her daughter looked. Again, she began to blame herself for being careless. She prayed to God to grant her daughter speedy recovery. I do not take this second chance for granted, Lord. I will be a better mother going forward, she muttered. More than anything, Mama Ujunwa wished her daughter would at least wake up and talk to her, but Ujunwa slept throughout. By morning, she went home to clean up and to prepare some food. She also made pap, hoping that by the time she got to the hospital, Ujunwa would be awake and able to take a little. When she got back to the hospital, Ujunwa was awake and transfusion had been completed. Mama Ujunwa hugged her daughter and apologized to her. She admitted she had a larger share of the blame. Ujunwa also apologized to her mother and promised to do better from then. The doctor entered to check on Ujunwa. He told Mama Ujunwa not to feed her yet. The drip will sustain her. You can start giving her light pap from tomorrow, he told her. He asked her to see him in his office as soon as she could. All the while, Mama Ujunwa didn't call Pastor Jackson and his wife or go to them. She was only interested in her daughter's recovery. She excused herself and went to see the doctor after some time. We thank God for her life. She is responding to treatment and her recovery is faster than I thought. However, there is a little challenge, the doctor began. You remember I told you her womb was ruptured. Ordinarily, we would have asked for your consent to take it out if she had given birth or had kids, he went on. But what we did was to patch it up. Oh, thank God it was able to arrest the bleeding. But I have bad news, the doctor said, shooting Mama Ujunwa a glance. What news, doctor? Mama Ujunwa sat up immediately. The chances of her womb being able to carry a child is 50/50, the doctor answered her. What do you mean by that, doctor? She may or may not be able to bear children. As a matter of fact, it would take a miracle for her to be able to carry a baby beyond the first trimester. He let out. Mama Ujunwa was shocked to her bone. She sat glued to her seat, trying to properly digest what the doctor just told her. If I get you correctly, doctor, you are trying to say that my daughter, Ujunwa Noam, might not have children in this life? She asked, looking shocked. It will take a miracle for that to happen, the doctor replied with a calm voice. Chimo, David has finished me. Pastor Jackson and his family have succeeded in destroying my daughter's life. She began to wail. Ujunwa is my only child, my only hope. Doctor, please, there should be something you can do to help me. Mama Ujunwa pleaded with the doctor in tears. I am sorry, Ma, but there is nothing we can do. She still has her uterus. She can still have children. There is nothing God cannot do, he answered her. I am only informing you of her situation. I am a Christian, and I believe in miracles. God can still do it, but medically, it looks almost impossible, he added. Mama Ujunwa put herself together, thanked the doctor and left his office. She went back into Ujunwa's ward. I want to quickly get to the house to attend to some things. I will be back soon, she announced to her daughter, and walked out of the ward immediately. She went straight to the church and went to Pastor Jackson's office. She walked past the secretary who tried to stop her from entering the office. She entered the office without knocking. Luckily for Pastor Jackson, he didn't have any guests at that time. He looked up as the door opened and saw his secretary trying to prevent Mama Ujunwa from gaining entrance. Sandra, let her be, he said to his secretary, who quietly walked out. Mama Ujunwa, you are welcome. I hope all is well. Please sit down, the pastor said, offering her a seat. I didn't come here to sit down. Are you aware that your son, David, got Ujunwa pregnant? Mama Ujunwa asked calmly, trying not to get upset. Pastor Jackson went quiet for some time before he finally answered. I only just found out on Saturday, and I was still waiting for the right moment to tell you, he replied. Oh, I see. Are you also aware that David gave Ujunwa something to drink to get rid of the pregnancy? She asked again. This time, Pastor Jackson was surprised. What? David did what? When? How? He asked. As I speak to you right now, Ujunwa is in the hospital. She had to undergo surgery because she began to bleed as a result of the substance she consumed. Pastor, my daughter might not be able to have children, according to the doctor, she informed him. Get ready, because I will get David arrested, she said, and turned to leave. Stop there, Mama Ujunwa. How dare you threaten me after all I did for you, Pastor Jackson thundered. You are the most careless mother I have ever come across. This is all your fault. You gave Ujunwa too much freedom, he went on. You cannot threaten me with arrest. We can talk things over without having to create a public mess of ourselves, he concluded, looking unapologetic. Mama Ujiwa began to clap her hands. Wonderful speech, Pastor Jackson. I expected this energy from you. So, because you did all you did for me, your family can deprive my daughter of her chances of becoming a mother and expect me to be cool with it? If I am the most careless mother, then what are you and your wife? Both of you claim to be pastors, yet you raised a rapist as a son. I will let the whole world know the kind of wonderful parents both of you are. Don't worry, Mama Ujinwa fired at him as she walked out of his office and slammed the door. Pastor Jackson was very upset. He picked up his phone, called his wife immediately, and asked her to meet him at home at once. Then he left the office and drove straight home. When his wife got home, he told her about his confrontation with Ujinwa's mother. Mrs. Angela was shocked to know that David could give Ujinwa something to take to get rid of her pregnancy. She wondered where he learned it from. David has finally given us a bad name, Pastor Jackson said as he went into David's room and called him out.